Good evening and welcome. I'm Richard Griswold, Associate Vice President, Dean of Students and Faculty Member at the Boston Architectural College. Our programs in landscape architecture, interior architecture, and design studies strive to provide excellence in design education, emerging from practice, and accessible to diverse communities. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce the BAC's first event in the Spring 2025 lecture series entitled Just Futures. This series is supported in part by Eastern Savings Bank. Our lecturers this evening are Philippe Saad and Jovi Cruces. Philippe is a licensed architect and a principal at DeMello Schaefer, where he joined in 2005. Philippe has focused his career on the design and construction of community-based projects in the senior living and multifamily residential markets at all incomes. Believing that architecture is a tool for equity and social change, he is the co-founder of Project Q Communities and a founding member of LGBTQ Senior Housing Incorporated. That's two nonprofits focusing on facilitating the development of housing for the LGBTQ older adults. Locally, Philippe volunteers in the Dorchester Community Neighborhood Organizations and at the Boston Society of Architects, where he co-chairs the Design for Aging Committee. Philippe received his Bachelor of Architecture degree at the American University in Beirut and his Master of Science in Architecture at MIT. Jovi Cruces is a senior associate at DeMello Schaefer, where he has worked on many kinds of projects and most recently focusing on the senior living market. Jovi received his Bachelor of Arts from Haverford College and his Master of Architecture and his Master of Public Policy from Harvard University. Over the years, Jovi has participated at the BAC as an instructor and critic, most notably co-leading 11-month-long travel study programs to Paris, Florence, Rome, Madrid between 2002 and 2013. Jovi is known for his keen ability to hand sketch, design ideas beautifully and on the fly. LGBTQ older adults have historically faced significant barriers to accessing safe, affordable, and community-affirming housing. This lecture will explore the Pryde, P-R-Y-D-E, located in Hyde Park, Boston, which stands as New England's first LGBTQ-affirming income-restricted senior housing. Developed through a grassroots initiative, the Pryde represents a groundbreaking model of inclusive housing that not only addresses the unique needs of LGBTQ plus seniors, but also a welcoming and integrated residential community. The discussion will highlight the project's innovative approach to creating a supportive and affirming living environment, both physically and socially, for older LGBTQ individuals. Please join me in extending the warmest BAC welcome to Philippe Saad and Jovi Cruces as they present their lecture entitled Creating Home and Community, the Pryde, LGBTQ Affirming Senior Housing.
Hi, good evening. This is working? All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Philippe and
I'm Jovi.
this is Jovi.
Yeah, everyone.
And we will be co-presenting this project together. But before we start, I just wanted to start by saying something that I've always wanted to say to a group of architects. And I don't think I've ever mentioned it like I wanted to always mention it, but today, because this is an audience that I think you all will be receptive, and I want to use the word architects not to mean only architects, but designers in general, because I want to acknowledge in the audience that we have multiple design professions, correct? And I hope that all of you could see some parts of your work or your passions in what we will show today, whether it is on the community focus side, architecture, interior design, or even landscape design, or if some of you are in the preservation majors as well. I understand there is also a preservation major here or adaptive reuse major at the BAC. So I think we have a lot for a little bit everybody. But a little bit about myself. As a architect. And this is where my conversation will start as the first thing I'm going to say here. The first time I've said this is because of my journey, I want us to think about our position in society as architects and designer a little bit beyond the profession itself. And I think what you will see here today is a little bit of that. I want to caution that this is absolutely not something that I want to boost the ego of the designer in it, but I want to maybe boost the agency that we as individuals who are in the design industry can do also beyond the design industry. So you will notice under my signature is principal at Demel Schaefer, which is my work, my day work, but also there's a co-founding member and board member of LGBTQ senior housing. And this is where I think today I will be talking to you from basically wearing two hats, wearing the hat of the architect, but also wearing the hat of the community member who at some point, I want to say because I'm an architect, I was able, and also I'm an individual in society and I'm a gay man, I was able to identify at some point that there's a need in our society. And sometimes the intersectionality of our personalities that allow us to do things that one of us, me, the architect, or me, the community member, couldn't do on my own. But because I have been blessed or I have been able to act in my multiple personalities, if we are to say that, things came together. So my journey here started maybe 15 years ago when, as a young architect who was working as a junior designer at Demel Schaefer in senior living, I walked into my first senior living project and I looked around and I said, this feels great. People are being supported. They have the right environment. How about my community? And one of my communities is the LGBT community. And that's where I, as a aspiring or junior architect, I started to think about how can I bring what I know is needed in society that doesn't exist yet with my community as well. So this is where the architect and I was not considered myself an activist at the time because I was just a young professional. But right now I look back and look at the journey that I've been doing for the past 15 years. There's definitely an advocacy part of me that I was totally not aware of. But I followed my passion and what I wanted to do and what I identify was needed. So over the years, with a very small group of individuals who most of us are and still are volunteers, we started conversations. And it really starts with a conversation about how do we get from point A to point B? Because the story that I will tell you today that Jovi and I worked on as architects, the story, there was no path. We couldn't figure out how do we, as individuals who identify a need, could get to the final point of having now a community building that we call the Pryde, that has people who live in it and for whom me as the board member is responsible for. So it was a lot of circular work, but always work that was guided towards the end goal, is to create a community, not a building only, but a community that would support the LGBTQ older adults. It was not an easy path, and we had a lot of roadblocks, and we had a lot of people along the way to say, it's never going to get anywhere. Why are you putting your time in this? That's not worth your time. But there was something deep in me that I've always said, I know it's needed, and I'm going to continue to do it. So as an individual and few group of friends of ours, we created that nonprofit back in 2018 that was called that became LGBTQ Senior Housing, Inc. Our website is lgbtqseniorhousing.org. It tells you that the web name existed, which means that no one had a mission like ours to focus on this mission. So we incorporated and we became a board. And since 2018, we are a nonprofit that is based in Boston. Now we're based in Hyde Park. And we are co-developers of the Pryde itself. Do you want to say something about you before we dive into the formal part?
I'll do a little intro before my section. It's good.
All right. So I say to people, sometimes I use the pronoun we. And for we, I mean we, meaning me, the architect, and me, the board member. All right. But right now, as the architect, going to maybe introduce my firm a little bit. I know a lot of you are familiar with Demal Schaefer, but I think it's good to just talk about it as we're one office. We're in Boston, in the Seaport. We're around 70 plus or minus architects, interior designers. And we do believe that diverse perspectives and opinions bring richness in the design industry and in life. And this is a little bit of who we are in terms of faces and what cultures we represent. But this is something we truly believe becomes part of who Demal Schaefer is. Just a little bit, you probably notice an accent. I am not from here. I moved to the Boston area 21 years ago. I'm from Lebanon. I'm an Arab who was born in Lebanon and came here as a student. And for MIT, I did my graduate studies and I stayed. I stayed partly because I found a place where I felt I belonged, not only in Boston, but also at the firm. Demal Schaefer has 5 different market sectors. Jovi works more across markets. I more focus on the senior living and the affordable housing market, but the markets are academic, residential, science and tech, and senior living and workplace. And those of you who are familiar with us or have been to Demal Schaefer, we encourage cross-pollination between different market sectors. All right, so that everybody has the opportunity to diversify their knowledge and their architectures. So today we'll talk about basically 3 parts. The work before the work, as I call it. And this is where the board member, me, as the non-architect, is going to walk you through what it took to get to maybe the design part of the work. We'll talk about the brand, because I think the brand is equally important to create the place. And then we'll talk about the Pryde, which is the product at the moment, which is an inclusive community in Hyde Park. All right. To set the stage, I think sometimes people wonder why is it so important to create housing that is focused or supportive to a community like the LGBT community? Because this slide basically summarizes, like, if you are someone in the mainstream older adults, right? You could have a spouse, you could have children or grandchildren. You have systems of support in society that most people could rely on, right? When you are an LGBTQ older adults, these support system really diminishes. And especially if it's an older adult that is now in their mid-70s or 80s, or even in their late 60s. Because people who are now at that age, they grew up where they could not feel comfortable having a spouse. So they might have had a lover or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or somebody special, but it was very not accepted in society. Definitely, most of them, if they had children from a previous marriage, they probably would have been estranged from their children's, right? Rejected from society. Same thing with their family of origin or their place of worship, even their local community. So the social community is very important for LGBTQ people in general, and that's why we have historically wanted to live together in what in Philadelphia they call the neighborhood, in New York it's called the gay village, in Boston it was the South End or some other areas, but that social community is extremely important. Sometimes in some states there are some social services, like in Massachusetts, that are attuned to the needs of the LGBTQ older adults, but nationally that's not the case. So you can imagine that if you're an older adult that is an LGBT person, your systems of support are very, very diminished. So that is what encouraged us as an organization to really get to the finish line and get this community that we will talk about, because we know that we need to be all this to the LGBT community. And you will see through the stories that we'll tell how the Pryde is not just a building, but it's a community. And today I sat with an individual at lunch that was interested to volunteer at the Pryde. And he was there, and he went to an event, and what he told me, he said that it feels like church. He's a churchgoer. So I know that the church community is a very strong community, and if you're part of one, you're really part of one. And I think hearing him say the Pryde as he experienced it feels like that church community is really a good thing, because I could tick one of those boxes that we think is not available for LGBT, but we're able to make it happen for those individuals who live with us right now. So a little bit on numbers. These are old numbers because it's very difficult to find data and recent data. A lot of census don't have LGBTQ people listed on it. Some states have it, nationally it's not. So, but it tells you back in 2018 that LGBTQ older adults are not at par with their counterparts. So they need more support. They need community organizations like us to really help them be more themselves in society and thrive as they get older. So when we started this, we were ourselves wondering, what does it take to do an LGBT senior housing? How can we sustain this? I want to say one thing here is that we have to remember that we cannot discriminate against non-LGBT. So with the community that I'm talking about, it is inclusive to LGBTQ older adults, but it's not exclusive to them. And I think that was a very important message when we talked with elected officials, other organizations in the Boston area, developers, the state funding agencies, that was based on fair housing. So we cannot discriminate. So our mission was to provide housing that is inclusive to LGBT, not exclusive to them. So thank you. Am I coughing too much? I apologize. There water is right there, but again, thank you. So to do this, there are some ingredients that we discovered that we needed along the way. And these are what you have here on your screen, is we need to have partnerships with local organizations for many reasons. Some of it is credibility. When there's a new organization that is right there in Boston that claims to develop LGBT senior housing, what is your legitimacy? Who are we? So creating partnership with organizations like the Aging Project, like the Fenway Health, the Elders of Color. These are important partnerships that we have built over the years. Working with also social and cultural organizations as well to bring in that LGBT culture into the building, to make sure that what we are doing, again, is targeted towards the population in general. LGBT programming, cultural competency, branding that I mentioned, and outreach. But I want to stop a little bit on the programming and the support services. And you will notice why this is important. Is because, as I said earlier, the Pryde is not just a building, it is a community. And to create a community, we need to create spaces where people could create things, be together, socialize. And you will see in the design later that the building is in two parts. There is the residences, which we call the housing, but there's also the community center that is equally important to the housing. And it's actually, they're interrelated. If we didn't have the community center there at the Pryde, the housing might not have been as successful. And the community center on its own, that is not always enough for people who really need housing and affordable housing. So they're really symbiotic. There's a symbiotic relationship between these two elements. Jovi will talk about the challenges of putting them in one building. So as a very grassroots organization that we were, with $0 on our balance sheet, we started literally with $0 on our balance sheet. How can we just end up with a building that cost $40 million? We had to search for a partner. So we searched for a partner, which is a developer, and we developed a criteria that is needed, that we wanted from this partner. And we found Penrose, which is a national developer of affordable housing, to partner with us. So we went together and we went after a public RFP that the city put out there for an existing school that was out of service. The school in Hyde Park was in great location and pedestrian friendly next to the library, next to the YMCA. So it felt like that's the right place to be. So we raised also awareness when we identify a place, we started knocking on people's doors. And we went to all the civic associations to tell them, hey guys, this building that you have in your neighborhood where many of you went to school, it's now sitting vacant. We have a plan to make it into LGBT senior housing. What do you think? The amount of support that we received in Hyde Park was overwhelming. When we submitted for the RFP for the city, we had 400 letters of support from community members. The city agencies have never seen this. It tells you, it says two things, that people really, our message was clear, people understood the mission that we were trying to do, but also that we truly wanted to create a community that is integrated in its neighborhoods. I think I know we would have failed if we said this is only housing and it's just a business model. We're gonna build a building, we're gonna get the rent and done. But we knew that if I lived in this building, I wanted to feel part of that community. I wanted that larger community to know that I accept them and they accept me. All right. A little bit on the timeline, I said that I started on it 15 years ago, but I think we can document the events that happened, maybe starting 2015. From a Boston City Council hearing to talking to all our elected officials, to starting our relationship with our developer Penrose in 2017, to incorporate it in 2018, and finding the site, getting the funding ready, doing the design and the construction, and then for occupancy in 2024. If somebody tells me now it's going to take 15 years to do this, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that challenge, but I'll do it anytime. So that's the work before the work, but let's talk about the brand. And so we knew that we started as calling it the LGBT housing, but then going out to the street, talking to individuals, we had to create a brand. And the organization was called LGBTQ-affirming.org. The logo, of course, represents the rainbow colors. Our president is very socially minded. So when the logo was developed without the two brown and black bars, she insisted that we need to make it all inclusive for everyone. And the LGBT flag at the time did not have the black and brown stripes. So we added those. And I think that became part of our brand. Once we started wanting to develop the building and we had the site, we wanted that the brand be anchored in the place. And that's where, with a group of community members, not just us, the board member, we created a small task force and we came up with the name, the Pryde with a Y. And the Y purposefully is there because we want it to relate to Hyde Park. We wanted to say that we are part of that place. So the Y relates to Hyde Park. The Y also symbolically wraps around the rainbow as like caring for everybody. So the brand needed to be strong and it needed to be out there. So once we had the brand, we had to go out and socialize it. And you will see later that we've organized 3 years of walking in the Boston Parade. I think 2023 maybe was our biggest crew. People from the office joined that were working on that building. They were very excited to be part of that parade. We've also took the brand and we put it on the helmet. We created stickers to put it on the helmets of the construction workers. We were a little bit hesitant to tell you that we were going to give this round sticker right there and say, hey, everyone in the building, this is the sticker for you. We love your work. If you are Pryde, put it on the helmet. And the amount of people that really adopted this philosophy and had the rainbow sticker on their helmet was really sobering and humbling for us. And then because we wanted to thank everybody who did this building, with us during the construction. We created a lunch and we invited all the workers, we as organization, not the Schaefer again. We created that lunch that we wanted to include all the construction workers to be part of it. And it's people were so proud that they knew that that nail that they're going to put in the wall is going to help somebody who doesn't have a home or has been discriminated against. So it was a beautiful moment. This photo shows the construction workers as well as our board members were here. Another picture of the Boston Pride event that we did. And then because we are part of Hyde Park and the school was an important element in people's histories. Our executive director, Gretchen, who grew up in Hyde Park, said, hey, hold on a second. This school is full of stuff and we don't want to put in the landfill. We want to create a giving away event for the community of Hyde Park, almost an open house that the school closed close to like 7 or 8 years ago. And people are welcome to come into the school and just take things that they want. People could go into any classroom, take chalk, take books, take chairs, take anything as a memory, as an element of their history in Hyde Park. I think building this partnership with the community has really paved the way really well and has really expressed to the community that you are part of us and we are part of you. And just like inclusivity is important to bring in people in as a architect and designer, we have ensured that the design is an inclusive process, that our board members are included in the design process. They make decisions and our design was really reflective of what the community needed. All right. I'll turn it to you, Jovi.
You know, I gotta say, Philippe, that memory lane trip was tremendous. I think the notion that Philippe touches on is an extremely important one for any designer, student of design. There's this application of what you're learning that I've been privileged enough to have enjoyed for 29 years. Half my life has been spent at DeMello Schaefer. Half that life has been spent on senior living. This is like no other senior living project I've worked on over 29 years, no other adaptive reuse project I've worked on over this. And I think it's in part because he wears so many hats, I can barely wear a bike helmet. But if you're honest about how you identify yourself, you actually don't exclude anyone else. You actually define yourself in multiple ways. I often talk to someone at the office, like, would you rather have one world language or like learn 100? I would rather learn 100. You know, you understand how, how your parts of yourself actually relate to others and relate to yourself as well. And I think that in as much as I've been lucky to be included in DeMello Schaefer, Karen, Mahesh, Rich, to be included in this talk, to have worked with so many BAC students and taught BAC students, it is including ourselves in the curiosity and embracing what you're curious about is ultimately, I think, how that DEI notion can, in fact, be multidimensional in a way that's fresh. This project is tremendous because it has allowed us to actually provide the city with something that is very rare. And I believe that its siting was actually one of its first genius moves. Hyde Park, it's a neighborhood I had not heard of before working on this project in 2019. But radially, distance-wise, it is equivalent to Milton and Quincy and Dedham. It's that far away from the Boston city center, but politically, it is part of Boston proper. If Boston were a river, this is its delta. This is how it meets the sort of outer suburbs. And I think that the community here, which produced Mayor Menino, the library of which is right across the street from our building, has allowed this neighborhood, because of that distance, to some degree remain under-considered. It's not sort of been plastic, gentrified like other neighbors have gotten a lot of attention. So you can in fact still appreciate and see the original fabric. Population-wise, Italian and Irish immigrants to America might have called this home. Later in the 20th century, African Central American immigrants were also calling this home and calling this places of work, creating spaces to live, to learn. And sadly, in 2015, this school closed. But it seemed like the opportunity, this idea of what kind of housing, this potential housing project that was just not 74 units of senior housing, incorporated this programmatic element that still was yet being defined, LGBTQ senior housing, as well as even other tenant space, which I'll talk about later. It allowed for, I think, the weft and the warp of this fabric to actually imbue every process of it from site selection onward. So the school, William Barton Rogers, he was the founder of MIT and the first president of MIT. He believed actually in applying what one learns theoretically to a science, to a practice of science. So there was this combination of the institution as well as the application of that knowledge. And so this is named after him. The building that you can kind of see with my cursor, the original school building is from 1902. Bilaterally symmetrical, there are these east-west hooded entries that actually would have had porte cocheres on either side, and then a central arch opening that takes you up to the first floor. There was one primary assembly hall space, which is these registered windows here with the transom. In 1920, 20 years later, they built Wing 2. Primarily, the Wing 1 1902 building is wood frame, extremely inventive about how they supported these large open areas. But Wing 2 and Wing 3 are concrete buildings. Wing 2 afforded them the first opportunity to have a cafeteria and then different size spaces. Wing 3, which you can't see in this photo, but you'll see in the plan actually, then created more regular classroom spaces, all of which then provided the challenge about how to then create a uniform building, but then dealing with the realities of each particular type. This is what it looks like now, so not too different, right? And that is in part because, as Philippe mentioned, there are so many people that got involved in terms of the community level, but as well as the team level, funding level, there are two historical agencies, one state-based, Massachusetts Historical Commission, and then one National Park Service, governed a lot of the decisions. They made us aware of what they were interested to keep, to showcase, and we incorporated those elements as well as developing this new program, working with this new 3 different structural types. And it does seem like a lot to carry, but I think so long as one recognizes its value, which I think is just simply to create another layer from which you then appreciate the intervention, it becomes, that 100th language. I would say that the character of the school, when it was one wing, was known as the school on the hill. You could see from the previous photo. That was a prominent site feature that I think people knew, students and families knew the building by. But for our work, we were very much interested in order to create accessible entrances to the building, and not just the residential portion as well, but also for the public portion. Accessibility clearly was something that was going to be a challenge, given that most of the existing entrances to the historic building had stairs that likely were non-conforming. They also reached different levels in the building, so you couldn't sort of establish that common public level versus the residences levels. The classroom is actually very interesting as well. From 1902, a classroom would have looked like the left drawing, wood floors, a lot of big windows, a lot of wood trim. To the right side is the 1933 building. This actually used ribbed concrete vaulting. So these spaces were larger and were able to then provide a much more uniform cellular classroom type. And because of the historic agencies that were actually approving this work, we actually had to come up with a way that allowed for all of these units to actually relate to one another, but then actually kept the specific historical element in each wing. There were then as well these performance or assembly gathering spaces in each building. The top
You click OK, so this bar.
Oh. Okay, voila. So I mentioned to you in 1902, there was this incredible assembly hall that had this stage. And this actually, this is supported by a truss, and actually there's a truss that supports the floor that's above this. On the floor above this is this tiered classroom. But in the 1933 wing, not only did they get to have a much larger cafeteria, but below that was this gymnasium. Again, all ripe for programming for senior housing that was unlike any other we've done before. The invention, both architecturally and programmatically, were almost hand in hand. This is going to help you a lot because the plan will orient you clearly, right? The right side is this facing Everett Street to the right is the 1902 wing. And it's very simple if you just had that. But we then are dealing with the 1920 wing and the 1933 wing, this conglomerate, this now big building that challenged us from the get-go. We've got this location, it's tremendous. Now, how do you enter this building for its different purposes? So instead of reusing the arched entry of the 1902 wing for all the program, we thought to then create distinct entrances, kind of using the side elevations of the wing and all along Harvard Avenue, which is actually a major avenue. It's where the library, Mayor Munir's library is felt. So it got to contribute to, I think, some of the landmarks in the neighborhood. As you can see, there's a lot of ramps. Because it's a street on a hill, in order to be accessible, we actually had to create three distinct openings in a historic wall that then got you sort of by wheelchair up to these three entrances. And so if you can see my arrow, on the right side is the primary residential entrance. This is ground floor of the residences, and 4 of the 74 units are actually on this ground floor because the site is low at this point. These units are incredible. But then when you ascend either one of these 2 elevator towers or either of the stairs, you then get to a proper floor plan that is of units on a double loaded corridor for 3 floors. The left entrance here was formerly of the gymnasium entrance, and that's where we had the public entrance. That was actually kept, circulation wise had to be sort of separate from the residences. If we didn't feel like it was good to have people come into the public programming and then suddenly found themselves on a corridor with units. And then in the middle of wing 2 is the service entrance. So all of these things were activating Harvard Avenue in very different ways based on their program, but also sort of like in a way that's 21st century that sort of allows the city to feel like it's growing and clearly is a new rotated reuse of the building. This is the more typical floor plan. On floors 1, 2, and 3. There's a courtyard that's in the middle here that on the ground floor doesn't appear, but because it's a hill and there's ledge, this is actually the first level that you access this courtyard. It became a strong orienting feature, not just for units, but also for circulation, to always know where you are in the building based on being able to look out a window and orient yourself to this program. As part of senior living, outdoor program space is extremely rich. And in some ways, I always think that like what this was like as a playground is probably being more used now by seniors like me. Again, I talk about this chance for action. You can see in the foreground this historic site wall, which the National Park Service in particular was critical of us keeping as much as possible. It's extant state when we encountered it didn't have a capstone. So we took the opportunity to actually get an approved stone for its capstone, but then also introduce this multi-stripe, colorful, brand specific kind of touch to it. Not kind of subtle, but also in keeping, I think, with the activity of this as the major avenue. You can see how with the porte cochere gone and the hill sort of lowered, the main entrance actually takes advantage of an existing historic copper hood that is on the first floor, but the residences would enter here through either the stairs or the ramp. This is on the right side is the plan of that ground level. When we talk about classrooms, Philippe was gentle about how it was a real challenge to actually reuse the specific historic elements from the casework. This is in wing 1 that actually showed a lot more detail than that which ended up being built in 1933 for the subsequent wings. But in this particular wing, we thought to highlight with a muted version of this of a wall color some of the elements to make it seem a little more plastic and to maybe make you not miss it when you get into the 1933 wing. Again, this notion of sort of how do we keep all of these units seeming similar. These windows are incredible, and when they are, when your kitchen is against it, or when you're looking over the hill, because again, you can see Hyde Park descend around you. Depending on which wing you're in, here on the right, you can see that there was a historic skylight that became a feature for this studio in wing 2. It is not so much senior housing never works when you feel like you're big and isolated. And I think that especially when it's LGBTQ senior housing, it's just as important to sort of feel like you're a part of the community and be seen as being a member of that community. This is a photo of a unit in Wing 3 that had a different treatment to its trim. So historically, we were told to not paint it, but to restain it. This wing also had different flooring and different exterior wall material that we actually had to keep as well. So there is this notion of how to let those elements sort of be part of the units that emerged in those wings. I failed to really mention in the floor plan, but the new construction for this project is not grand. It is 2 stair towers and a sunroom. And they all occur on the historic courtyard side of the building. You can see what that might have looked like before. It allowed, I think, the sunroom element to feel like the center of this new campus. And the outdoor space contains both a walking track, places to sit, to plant, to exercise. It is as dynamic, and it will change obviously over the course of one's life there, but over the course of the seasons, all with the sunroom being this focal point to sort of see that kind of aging chapter that each of us goes through. It's discrete what was new that was added, and I think that this next section will actually look at the interior. But as an exterior, I would say that the historical agencies were also interested to not mimic when we were creating something new, the historic fabric. And in as much as that's a charge, we also wanted it to relate to the horizontality of the material as well as the verticality of the program as elevator towers.
Yeah.
Just say one more thing. The one thing about, not one more thing, one thing. I want to go back in the, whoops. No. All right. Maybe this image. I don't know how much you guys are familiar with notions of senior housing and what it takes to do a building like this. There are a few key elements that we did differently in this building that we do usually in affordable senior housing. But because people ask me a lot, like what is different in the design of this building? And it's not the rainbow colors. It's not LGBT people don't have needs different like in daily lives than other people. But we know that socially, there is this need to create that social community, right? So specifically in this building, we needed to have different types of amenity spaces, and you'll see it more in the interior design chapters of this presentation. But I wanted to show you this one because we inserted the sunroom, which is really, it's not needed as a space. If you go through a program of what it takes to do affordable housing for seniors, the sunroom is really superfluous, right? But the spaces in the building that we were maintaining and preserving were very isolated. There was the assembly hall that was on the 2nd floor of the residential wing, and there was the gymnasium, which was on the basement floor of the community center. That was in the middle of the units. That we couldn't find a amenity space that was in the school that would allow people to organically gather. Like this informal space where just come as you are, bring your coffee mug in the morning, get a book, read something. And there was also, because it was a historic school, there was not enough relationship with the outside. And we know that we needed to create a space, and you'll see the images of the sunroom, that really brings outside in and is equally outside. So that's where the design of the courtyard was crucially important, to take an amenity space that might seem superfluous, but make it as the heart of the Pryde. 2 other things we did in this building is that we purposefully planned that, and you and the team worked very hard, that all kitchen and all bathrooms are accessible, which is usually beyond what the codes require, especially in adaptive reuse, because you can get exempt from accessibility if you have an existing building. But because we knew that if you were one of the lucky 74 people who could live in that building, if your physical condition deteriorates and you need a walker or you need a wheelchair, or if you broke your hip and you come back from rehab, we wanted people to remain in the community.
so that people could age in this community of choice. The third thing that we did differently is usually senior housing is usually one bedroom apartments. Real estate is very important, is very expensive. And if you are an older adult, you're either a single or in a couple. So you don't really need two bedrooms. A couple can live in a one bedroom, and a one bedroom is ample space for one person. But we put two bedrooms. We had 9 two bedrooms,
Yeah.
right? Purposefully, because we knew that in the LGBT community, people have lived all their lives as roommates, as family of choice. People who would not share a bed, but they will share an apartment. And these people needed to, if they were to relocate to the Pryde, they needed a two-bedroom apartment. They wanted to live in the same household. So that's another differentiator. So there's maybe like 3 differentiators that I usually talk about that is important for this building in particular.
Continue, because it's at these years now.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. In terms of interior design, when you deal with one historic building is complicated enough, but when you deal with 3 historic buildings that are all connected and each one of them has a different expression, it makes it even more complicated. Wing 1, historic trims, kind of neoclassical kind of architecture woodwork. Wing 2 was built in the 20s. Seems like resources were not enough. It was really on the cheap side. So it looks very institutional. Wing 3, they had these glazed tiles on the walls and stained trims that needed to be maintained. So if you're an older person and you had to navigate through the building with multiple doors and doors that signify different things, you're already lost. And if you're an older adult who has a slight, and a lot of us has some sort of dementia as we get older, then the confusions happened more. So what we did is we decided that everything historic except the stained trim has to be whitewashed, right? The walls are white, the trims are white. The existing doors that have not been painted also become white. And only the unit doors carry a color. And this color is color-coded per floor for also wayfinding. If you happen to work on a historic building, the doors are very important for MHC and NPF, right?
Yeah.
You cannot remove doors from public hallways. And usually classrooms have 2 doors and every classroom becomes one apartment. So we can't afford to have 2 doors into one apartment. So you have to kill one door and use another one. So you could shut one door closed. So it's not functional. You paint it white and then it looks like the wall. You build a wall behind it and you're done. But the issue that we have is historic doors are not rated. So they will not comply with the codes. So this is why the green door is inserted into an opening that is a historic opening, but the historic door is flipped open and becomes a wallpaper on the wall to satisfy the historic requirements. So this created some textured and historic character into the building that was carried throughout. On wing 3 on the left-hand side, you see the stained door. They are fixed into the walls. And then you have a colored door that is inserted inside the historic opening. Jovi figured this out with the team. So in terms of color, we talked about the brand that is important. But when you call an interior designer and you tell them design with like 7 colors of the rainbow all together in one space, it's just not gonna look good. So it is part of a brand. We muted the colors a little bit in terms of change the shades of the colors. But our interiors designer decided, all right, we have 4 floors. We can put the colors by pair and by floor so that you create a dual color palette that is complementary, that helps with wayfinding. And you don't have all the colors together in all one spaces. So ground level was plum and orange, yellow and green, and blue and red, and brown and pink. Rose, not pink. So this translated itself into the door colors on the floors. So the green doors are on the level 1 and the pink doors are on level 3. This is a view of showing you how the old historic entrance became the entrance to the different classrooms. And then how in terms of fabrics,
Color was only brought in through the doors and through the furniture. So the rest of the building, as you will see in the next pictures, are all it's very white. Again, to neutralize the historic fabric and bring in the color through everything that's new. Some views, interiors. This is the elevator lobby on the second floor of the building because it's red. That's a lounge on the third floor. It has the pink and the brown colors. This is a view of the sunroom on the ground floor that is open. This is the space that I said we really needed to create community. We had to create that space that is that informal gathering space. It has a fireplace. It has bookcases, puzzle tables, full transparency into the courtyard. This is where we literally put the money of the project in. You want to talk about the rainbow?
You know, not to disavow the use of colors, but it's certainly in this space ended up being something that actually helped meet code. There are 2 units on the other side of the assembly hall in the historic 1902 wing. And not just for egress, for them to have access to 2 means of egress, but it's actually for accessibility, allowing accessible wheelchair accessibility to anyone who might be visiting or living in those 2 units. So to create a clear circulation in a space that might be meant for gathering at times or for different furniture moving, we thought that to actually have something that was expressive and colorful and actually not rectilinear like everything else in this room, from the historic frieze to the stage, was a way, and it was approved in a variance application to gain accessibility for 2 units that were on the other side. There were many ways we were trying to solve this. Early on, we thought to actually make the stage narrower and create a corridor. It would actually then mean that the assembly hall would not actually have connection to the courtyard. Whether it's from cost to actually program that solution, this solution ended up being the way germane to the project, was the way that we were able to meet code, which is, if you can say those 2 sentences disparately on any building that gets built, and it's not even just like, reverse engineering it, the struggles that we have talked about in ways for our lives for 5 years, and it's just tremendous to sort of see these before and afters. I think that
I don't know what's happening.
yeah.
You remember early on, we talked about the importance that this building is just not just a building, but it's a community, and the community center is equally important. What you see here is the public spaces in the community center. It's open to all of us. There are events that happens on a regular basis. You're welcome to check us out on the website and see what's happening there. This is the main entrance right here that leads you through that archway into the art gallery. Since day one, we have rotating art that highlights the LGBTQ culture and life and struggles. We had Black artists, LGBTQ Black artists, as our first exhibit right here at the Pryde. And this is the lobby that leads you to the community center at the bottom through the glass that you see. Again, the rainbows are shown through light fixture installation and other elements. That is the gymnasium that we visited 5 years ago when we were looking at building, and that's our current community center at the moment that LGBTQ senior housing runs and operates with our 4 full-time staff. It is a basement space, but the natural daylight and the colors that were infused into that space, our interior designer decided that this is the only space that's going to get all the different colors of the rainbow, and rightfully so. It's large enough. It allowed all this. Historic Commission required us to paint the basketball lines on the floor, but we overlaid this with the LGBTQ colors of the rainbow. So now we have, again, this multi-intersectionality of who we are, all in one space. I think I will close with the slide. And that is, I think back in December, our executive director said, hey, we're hosting the Trans Ball, part of the Trans Day of Remembrance at the Pryde. And I showed up there, and it was a beautiful moment as an architect, but also as a community member. Sorry. To walk into that space and know that we were able to provide this big community room where everyone could be themselves. The energy in this room is phenomenal. And it stayed till 11 o'clock at night. Everybody was accepted. Chastity Bowick here on the right-hand side, she's a board member. She even had a portable closet for her that she brought in for the ball specifically, because she said we have a lot of people in our community who probably cannot afford the outfits that they want. So in one of the classrooms, she camped her closets. I walked in and I'm like, Chastity, what's this? And there were racks and like beautiful outfits. She's like, I'm bringing my closet for those who cannot afford. They want to walk in the ball, but they cannot afford. So that's the end of the lecture. I wanted to keep you guys with this. This is from the school. To tell you that the school has seemed to have helped a lot of people be themselves. And I think us as leaders, as architects, as business owners, you in the future as business owners, or just designers or community members, recognizing the strength in people and making them the best in themselves is great. It is very supportive to our community. And I want to leave you with that. Thank you. Sorry, I was trying not to be a mess, but it's unescapable. We have time for questions, I guess.
Oh, if you have a question, why not walk to the microphone? That way the people at home, the home viewers can see it, and then we'll watch on Zoom to see if there are any questions there. Thanks.
Oh, there's one.
Go there. Thank you, recognize.
Hello, thank you very much. This was so inspiring. It's always incredible seeing this is actually like works that are developed with inspiration and love and passion. So first of all, thank you so much for it. But I was wondering, earlier you mentioned that this project wasn't about, it was about inclusivity, not, and you didn't want to exclude any groups. So in the end, how did it actually end up being occupied? Is it mostly LGBTQ, or is there like an even mix, or how did it actually end up working out?
It's a great question, because affordable housing is very scarce in Boston, and we knew that we needed to put the message out there very differently than just the building or any marketing strategy. So just to quickly answer your question, but I'll explain a little bit more about our strategy and our fear. At the moment, we don't keep track because it's an inclusive community. But our executive director says that it is close to 60% to 65% of the residents of the building who are identify as LGBT. And the way we know that, not just, we're not assuming, but we host every Friday at 11 o'clock and at 2 p.m. a social hour. And this in the sunroom. And residents come in from their units. And if you're a new resident, you're encouraged to come down and meet your neighbors. And just people share their stories. And this is how we are able to say like somewhere between 60 to 65% of the current residents are LGBT. But I want to say one thing here is that everyone who walked in through the doors, I think because of what our executive director called radical hospitality, I love this term, feels part of this space. We have heterosexual people. We have two straight women who were part of the ball, and they were having a blast. And they were taking pictures with the performers. And seeing this means that we created a community for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
In one of the earlier slides, when you discussed the site wall, where the historic commission required you to preserve as much of that as possible, what you said. You mentioned that you went through an iteration of finding a capstone. You ended up with that really nice black granite. How many iterations and what other materials were in that part one? And then second of all, you had some vertical embellishments on the entryway through there that looked like maybe they were copper or something. I was curious what that material was.
Oh, what was that second question? I'm sorry.
The embellishments walking through the site wall, you had some
Okay, yes,
pilasters on the
I
side.
think those were just vertical applications of the stone.
Or were they just ribbons hanging on that? What are those?
Actually, that's engraved. That is sort of like colored engraved lines in the stone. That actually carry through the whole length of it and up the wall to the main entrance of the residential portion.
And what other options for the capstone did you consider?
The quarry, for much of the stone, for much of the slate repair had to be, samples obviously were sent and resent because we worked with an incredible historic consultant called PAL Inc. that would document the materials and then have them sent to Washington DC for approval by the agent that was that was charged with our project. So there was never any sort of installment of the stone. There were samples that were needed to be approved. Slate and this stone maybe 3-4 times, let's say.
Yeah, congratulations on that. In my experience, site walls are the sacred cow
Yes,
of
yeah.
historic sites, and getting them even allowed to touch.
I mean, your knowledge actually also pointed to the fact that over 3, periods of time, there was different pudding stone associated with the 1902 wing versus different stone in much worse repair for the 1920 and 1933 wing, which had to be rebuilt like how it existed on a timeline, as it were.
Nice job, well executed.
Thank you.
Hello, I wanted to thank you for this project. It's very inspiring and just exciting to see something like this come to fruition in the city of Boston. Earlier, you spoke about how important it is to have community partners and how many years it took to cultivate these community partners and how it contributed to the execution and caused the execution of this project. I'm curious how your community partners were involved in the design process and how they influenced those the changes and decisions that were made.
So the community data is very difficult to gather for LGBTQ organization. We had relationships, we created partnership with the Aging Project, which was at the time, it's the LGBT Aging Project, and it was at the time a standalone not-for-profit that was focusing on the LGBTQ older adults. Now it's under the Fenway Health organization. So we relied on them to receive data for to better understand what's the composition of our population that might live in our building. And in the absence of like real data that is documented, they were also relying on their lunches that they were hosting for the older population, the events that they were doing to feed us some of that information. And with that information, we were able to understand that, for example, there's a need for some 2 bedrooms. We have households of 2 that are not couples, but they're just families of choice. In terms of the larger partners, we hosted multiple events at the local organizations in Hyde Park. Hyde Park has 4 civic organizations. So we did a dog and pony show, took our stuff and showed everything we were doing. We see feedback from them. We did not invite people to be at the design table in general. We invited our board to be part of the design solutions. We invited a small group of individuals who were part of our volunteer group to join us in creating the brand. So the brand, the Pryde that you see, is developed by a small group of individuals. The other partners are what do we have? Local organization, the Fenway Health. So we have we have a small exam room in the building that is intended to be serviced by the Fenway Health. Right now, we don't have it operational yet because the building opened last June, so it's just 6 months. But this is something that we want them to service. So a visiting doctor, a visiting nurse could come in on a regular basis and occupy this. There's another relationship, the 54th Regiment. So, so part of our outreach to the Hyde Park community, we understood that there is a group that is called the 54th Regiment. And those of you who know
the history of the Civil War, the 54th Regiment is one of the first Black infantry contingents that fought the Civil War. They mustered in Hyde Park, and now they have a lot of their historic artifacts sitting in somebody's basement. They are an organization that doesn't have really much resources, but they exist there, and they're very important to the national history of the United States. So we reached out to them, and we gave them a space in the building right now that is close to 600 square feet, 700 square feet, where they can have an office, they can have a storage room, and they can have a small exhibit. So when they're ready, they haven't moved in yet. So these are the partnerships. So we ran the design with them. We sat around the table, and we listened to what they needed, and then I was included in the building. So right now we're partnering with the Hyde Park artists to come in and do some rotational exhibits in the building. Again, the building is part of the larger community.
And other than the 2-bedroom units,
Yeah.
what were some other design changes or unexpected conclusions that you came to through your community outreach?
Oh, through that outreach?
Yeah.
It's funny, I haven't thought much about how the traditional senior living that I've worked on in the past, and at the very same time, parallel time, actually, one more standard senior living campus was being opened in Lexington. I would say that the uniformity of the size of the units allowed for more people to sort of to create and come and put their stamp on their spaces. The need for more 2 bedrooms literally came out of a request from one of these community outreach. The 54th Regiment, I think, is a wonderful example of a space that is not specific to the gay community, but is supporting the community at large. In terms of what kind of input impacted the unit design, I would say that we probably have more studios than is typical in a standard senior living project. I think that's probably what I would move into.
I want to add one thing that is very unique to here is, and I'm not sure I can directly answer your question, but there is a feature here that is very unique to the Pryde, which is the commissary store that usually doesn't happen in affordable housing because, again, real estate is very important. But our board chair said this was designed during COVID when people could not, sometimes are very concerned about leaving their building to go and shop for things. And when you're an older adult, you end up isolated. So we built in actually that space right here. And if you see my mouse right here, is a little convenience store. So the intent was that this store will have the toilet paper, toothpaste, toothbrush, some canned food, things for emergency situations. Our executive director just decided with her radical hospitality is that we're not going to sell things to people. This is going to be a free store. So now it's being furnished by volunteers, donors. It's run by the residents, and people only come down when they truly need something. And I think this is commendable to her, but also to the people who live in the building, because for us individuals here in society, it's like, all right, I need toothpaste, I'm just going to go down. But people are not tapping into this resource unless they're really into financial constraints. So it tells you how the community is really together on that.
Thank you.
Sure. We'll do a positive occupancy evaluation in 6
Yeah.
months,
Yeah.
and we'll get how the building has served, and we can share this data. Yeah, it's important.
Thank you for it was an incredible project. Thank you so much.
Hi, I did have one question that was more on the interior side. The firm that I currently work at, the senior living practice, is doing an increasing amount of study and research on dementia and senior living residences that have dementia and or residents that have dementia, and how as the boomers are getting older, there are more residences and the increased demand of senior living. Did you take any design approaches to help address dementia, and whether it's wayfinding, the character of the building itself? I know that notice there's a lot of white, and I know color and lighting kind of play into that, and I wanted to know how you approach that project.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, absolutely. We relied a lot on dementia-friendly principles to infuse into this building. And
those of you who probably have a parent or know someone who is in a dementia unit, unfortunately, it costs somewhere between $8,000 to $12,000 per month to have a bedroom there, right? So we know it is not an affordable housing model. And again, I said at some point earlier in the lectures that if you're one of those 74 lucky individuals who could move in or were a part of the lottery that were selected to move into this building, we don't want you to leave, nor you could afford if you have dementia. So we needed the building to really serve everyone. And again, to be in inclusive with a big I, including people who have dementia. So the color coding by floor, the whitewashing of the walls to remove all the confusing elements, part of the door strategy that I mentioned earlier, is based on dementia-friendly principles to really simplify reduce the triggers in the environment and make people's eye go to what is important. So that's why the doors are colors. The door numbers is right next to the door and it's highlighted by light. The door numbers, if you notice here, and where is that slide? Right there, they're black. So they are in contrast with the white wall behind. So if your eyesight deteriorates, you could see it. It's backlit at night. So again, the eye goes to the lighting. The lighting level in the building is pretty high, purposefully to also guide people throughout the days. In terms of courtyard design, what we've included, oops, the other way. I want to show you this because it's important. People who have dementia, unfortunately, sometimes can wander around and they need a secure environment they could elope. I'm not claiming this is not a secure courtyard, and nor it should be used as a secure courtyard. But there are elements like the track that is all around this to allow people to let themselves go a little bit, be accompanied by maybe a loved one or individual if they want to go around. So there's this track that is, where's the floor plan? Which way, this way?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that walking track in the courtyard that has some elements of dementia friendliness to create that wandering loop. Again, it's not a secured courtyard, but it addresses that. The Jovi mentioned that the amenities are courtyard centric, and there's a lot of always where you are by looking out. So again, this is part of the wayfinding. We did not want to, we wanted to allow people, no matter where they were in the building, to really know where the outside. And this is another strategy of the dementia-friendly design. But thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you.
Contrast is important, daylight is important.
Thank you so much. So my colleague has been sharing all the questions that are happening in
Oh,
the
online.
chat. We
Okay.
don't have time for them, but I have the names and I will be sharing, if you're okay, your email with
Oh,
them so that
absolutely. It'll be
they
wonderful.
can correspond. with them. But
Absolutely.
we have a lot of people saying how heartening the work
Oh.
is, and I just want to let you know that it was a very moving lecture.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, BAC.